London, January 19th, 1910. A man stands in a circle of stage lighting at the Apollo Saldo School on Great Newport Street. He is 5 feet 3 and 3/4 inches tall. He weighs approximately 145 pounds. His name is Max Sick, and he is about to make the assembled audience, weightlifters, wrestlers, the editor of Health and Strength magazine, utterly speechless. He begins to move. His shoulder blades wing out from his spine and draw back. His latissimus dorsi expands and contracts like a slow bellows, independent of his arms. Then his pectorals roll in sequence. Then the trapezius, the deltoids. His abdominals appear and rearrange themselves on command. A contemporary account describes it this way. His body was like a transformation scene. One moment he was all chest. The next, he was all back. And again you saw his abdominal muscles marshaled, so to speak. His will seemed to act as commander-in-chief, the report reads, and at a signal from him, and without any forcing, the latissimus, the abdominals, the deltoids, seemed to do whatever they were told. In music halls, he had performed the same act with his muscles twitching in synchronization with music from the orchestra pit. That evening in London, the gathered professionals were reportedly flabbergasted. Max Sick had spent the previous 13 years developing a systematic, teachable method for achieving exactly this. He published it in 1910 under the title Muscle Control, followed in 1914 by Great Strength by Muscle Control. 54 full-page illustrations documenting every exercise. The full text of the 1910 edition is free at archive.org tonight. Thousands of men practiced this method. And then, without a decree or a decision, it largely disappeared. Not because it stopped working, because you can't sell a mirror. Maxick wasn't an anomaly. That distinction matters. Otto Arco, born Otto Nowoselski in Poland in 1881. 5 feet 2 inches tall, 138 pounds, arrived at the same capability through a completely different route. By 1907, he had become the second man in the world to lift double his body weight overhead. By 1913, Physical Culture magazine had named him World's Most Perfectly Developed Man. He had also, independently of Maxick, developed the capacity to move individual muscles on command. Arco's signature demonstration was called the rope. Standing before an audience, he would flex individual segments of the rectus abdominis while completely relaxing the surrounding musculature, the muscle appearing as a vertical cord running down a relaxed midsection. Maxick, separately, could flex individual rows of the abdominals, both vertically and horizontally. Alan Calvert, who co-published Arco's instructional text, How to Learn Muscle Control, in 1925, was precise about the sequence. Those who reproduced his act reproduced his poses as well as they could. But there was no decided advance in the art of muscle control until Arco came along. He not only was able to duplicate all the control feats of his predecessor, but by reason of his study and knowledge, could and did originate a lot of new feats. Two men, same capability, independent origins. That isn't genetics. That is method. For the audiences of 1910, the performance context was everything. These were music hall stages, vaudeville circuits. Eugen Sandow had performed muscle displays at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago and at the Royal Albert Hall in London in 1901. And producer Florenz Ziegfeld, watching crowds respond more to Sandow's physique than his lifting, redirected the act toward display. But it was dynamic display, muscles moving, changing, responding to visible intention. A century later, IFBB men's bodybuilding competitions require performance of 7 mandatory poses, static positions, quarter turns, predetermined angles, the body held, muscles shown rather than moved. The shift from performance to presentation happened gradually, institutionally, without a single decision anyone can point to. Audiences who watched Maxick's abdominals ripple in sequence were watching something different from what happens on a competition stage today. What they were watching no longer exists as a competitive form. Maxick's own case went beyond spectacle. He built his physique initially using muscle control techniques without weights, and incorporated heavy lifting only later. His 1910 text states the principle directly. Mechanical exercise, either with or without apparatus, will never produce the limit of strength and development of which the individual is capable unless combined with muscle control. A muscle is organized into motor units, groups of fibers controlled by a single nerve. Most untrained people recruit around 30% of available motor units during a voluntary contraction. Trained athletes push toward 50%. The rest stays silent, regardless of effort. Deliberate, isolated contraction practice trains the nervous system to access a higher proportion of that silent majority. The muscle doesn't gain more fibers. It learns to deploy the ones it already has. Otto Arco put it differently in his instructional text. Muscle control gives you a selective control, and therefore the ability to single out those muscles necessary to the work to be done, and only those muscles, leaving the antagonistic or non-helpful muscles relaxed. That makes a saving of energy in two ways. These men could isolate any major muscle group. Then they trained it. The neural pathway was already built. The weight found somewhere to go. Here is the method. This is how it was practiced. You stand in front of a mirror, shirt off. The mirror isn't vanity, it's feedback. And for the first several sessions, you won't be able to feel the contraction clearly enough to rely on sensation alone. Start with the right pectoral. Place your hand flat across the right side of your chest, fingers spread, palm in contact with the muscle. Don't arch your back. Don't tense everything at once. Direct your attention, not effort, not force, to that specific mass of tissue. Maxick's own instructions from the 1910 text. Just pull or press as the case may be, following the directions as closely as possible, looking all the time for the particular muscle to appear. Looking all the time for the particular muscle to appear. That is the complete instruction. Hold the attention there for 6 seconds. Release. The documented beginner protocol runs 2 to 5 repetitions at that 6-second hold, no more than 1 to 2 minutes per muscle group. The full session, working through back, shoulders, chest, arms, abdominals, runs 30 to 45 minutes, practiced 2 to 3 times weekly. What Arco's collaborator Calvert emphasized, and what most beginners miss, the primary challenge isn't contracting the target muscle, it's relaxing everything around it. Shoulder isolation fails because the trapezius fires alongside the deltoid. Pectoral isolation fails because the anterior deltoid joins uninvited. Learning which muscles to silence is as technical as learning which muscle to speak. After the pectorals, the abdominals. Begin with a full exhale. The slight natural vacuum created by empty lungs helps depress the abdominal wall. Place your hand just above the navel. Focus on the upper portion of the rectus abdominis alone, not the obliques, not the hip flexors, not the ribs. 6 seconds. Release. Repeat. Over weeks, something shifts. The nervous system builds a more precise map of that specific tissue. Each contraction becomes more complete, more isolated, more intentional. The Bronze Era practitioners described this not as exercise, but as fluency, a vocabulary of the body they were always extending. In Chicopee, Massachusetts, a man named Ed Jubenville was still doing this every morning well into the late 20th century. Jubenville built weight benches and gym equipment for lifters across New England. East Coast powerlifting meets ran on equipment he fabricated. Iron Game History, published by the Stark Center at the University of Texas, described him as perhaps the last great muscle control artist in the United States. The volume, Training Secrets of John Grimmick, placed him directly alongside Maxick. The best courses on muscle control are those written by Maxick and Ed Jubenville. In 1988, Jubenville self-published That's Muscle Control in Chicopee. A 2005 republication from Fitness Therapy Publishing followed. Both editions are still findable through used booksellers and Scribd. Jubenville died after finishing a back exercise, sat down on a bench, and was gone. The Stark Center memorial, published in Iron Game History the following year, described that moment with a precision that resists paraphrase. Ed had died at 148, and for the first time in 55 years, he no longer had immediate, bewildering control over his muscles. 55 years of daily practice. And the phrase, immediate bewildering control, names exactly what the London audience had watched in 1910 without being able to name it. The practice never fully disappeared. It moved. In yoga studios worldwide, a technique called Nali Kriya involves the same isolated abdominal contraction that made audiences speechless watching Arco perform the rope. The rectus abdominis isolated voluntarily while surrounding musculature releases. Paramahansa Yogananda's Yogoda system of the 1920s, which academic literature has explicitly compared to Maxik's method, centered on conscious muscular contraction and relaxation as its core discipline. Belly dancing trains progressive isolated muscle movement as a foundational technique and has done so continuously. The practice survived. It simply found other containers. The Max Alding Postal Course, Maxik's instructional mail order system, co-developed with business partner Monte Saldo, sold into the 1970s. So the disappearance wasn't sudden. It was a slow fade, the kind that happens not because something fails, but because the commercial structure around it changes. Commercial fitness centers expanded significantly through the late 1950s and into the early 1960s. Equipment manufacturers filed rising numbers of patent applications through the 1960s and 1970s. The Weider supplement companies were advertising nutritional products aggressively by the mid-1950s. A business model built around physical transformation needs something to sell. A machine, a powder, a program, an instructor. Muscle control needs a mirror. Maxik developed his physique before touching a barbell. His system required no gym, no supplement, no coach. A practice with that profile generates no recurring revenue and no distribution channel. The fitness industry organized itself around equipment and instruction. A practice requiring neither became commercially invisible. Nobody chose to end it. The market simply had no mechanism to continue it. Every morning, before touching a weight, these men spent 15 to 30 minutes in front of a mirror working through a deliberate sequence of isolated contractions. Not warm-up, practice. A vocabulary they were always extending. The texts still exist. Maxik's Muscle Control from 1910 is free at archive.org. Arco and Calvert's How to Learn Muscle Control from 1925 is available through Abe Books and Scribd. Jubenville's That's Muscle Control from 1988 can still be found through used booksellers. Tonight, try this. Stand in front of a mirror, shirt off. Place your hand just below your sternum. Exhale fully. Focus on the upper portion of your abdominals alone. Just the upper row, nothing below the navel, nothing in your sides or ribs. Try to make it respond independently. Hold the focus for 6 seconds. If it responds on the first attempt, you have a head start that would have impressed them. If it doesn't, and it probably won't, that is exactly where every Bronze Era master began. Tell me what happened. Subscribe for more stories like this.